name is Paul McAllister. I'm the managing editor for the site Picturing Black History, and I am here with Michael Santiago, interviewing him for the article he wrote for Picturing Black History, Photographing History in the Making. And this is about how Michael captured the final crossing of civil rights legend John Lewis during his funeral. Michael, would you like to kind of introduce yourself and give some of your background?
Sure. Thank you for having me and for doing this. My name is Michael Santiago. I am a staff photojournalist at Getty Images based out of Brooklyn, New York. I am originally from Dominican Republic and have been living in America for going over 30 years and have been with Getty for the last going on 5 years, basically capturing, for the lack of a better word, history as is unfolded in everybody's eyes the last 5 years, which every week seems to be something new to add to the history books.
Yeah, that's cool. We're happy to have you with us. So, can you tell us kind of a little bit about the article, how you were brought onto the project, and why you chose to write about this specific subject?
When they approached me about this project, I initially thought that it was just about images. I had no idea that I needed to write something with the images that came through. And I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. I mean, I love to write. I love written words. I wish that I would have become a writer. But when they asked me to pair my images with the words, I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. I mean, I've covered a lot of history, especially the last couple of years. But getting a chance to write about my experiences with the civil rights icon John Lewis and his final crossing after his passing was something that I couldn't pass up. I knew that when I received that assignment and when I was there on the ground, that this was something that this country was always gonna remember.
You go into a little bit in your piece about your experiences learning about Black history. Can you give us more about like the impact that this event had on you and how that correlated to your experiences as a child, kind of growing up and learning and absorbing all of this information about Black history?
Yeah, I mean, ever since I remember. I mean, I say this all the time. Like when I was in like sixth or seventh grade, I pretty much carried like 100 average in social studies class of civics because I loved history. This is not my native country, so I've always taken every opportunity to learn more about the history of this country, especially how it informs. The past informs where we are at today. And then, as a journalist, I have to take into account, what has happened in the past and how that's still affecting us now.
I guess getting more into like the more technical details as a
hmm
professional photographer, as a photojournalist, how did you try to approach this assignment? What was your kind of mentality and method going in?
Yeah, I mean, we've all, I hope for the most part, everybody in this country has seen the images of the march to Montgomery from Selma. I had those images in my head the entire time. I was thinking about, the images of everybody crossing, holding hands. And when I got there, I was paired up with another photographer, and we were talking about what we are gonna do and how we were gonna approach this. And like in my head, I'm like, all right, I was thinking that I kind of want to recreate that image of the hearse or as it was the horse and carriage crossing the bridge, but I kind of wanted to do something different. And for the most part, a lot of photographers were on the other side to capture that crossing, and I was like, all right, how would it look like if I'm on the other side and I'm catching the hearse going to the bridge? So I took a walk over there and I looked and I'm like, this is perfect. I think that for one, there's not a lot of photographers on this side, so I'm gonna be one of the few to capture the final crossing as it begins, and it just kind of makes sense to me. It was just it was clean. I was already picturing the photo that I wanted
Yeah.
when I got there and I had my position. And what ended up happening is that as time progressed and it was about to happen, like everybody just crowded there. So I had to kind of reposition myself, and I ended up finding a spot where I climbed up a little bit higher, and I was able to get the spot that I wanted, and I knew exactly where I wanted the hearse to be at, and the distance that I wanted it from the bridge where you can see Emmett Pettus Bridge on there, and I just had it all in my head, and envisioned it that way, and that photo just came out exactly how I envisioned it.
I love your description of the kind of intentionality that goes into the photography of capturing a moment like this. with the project, one of the things we're focused on is giving people a lens into like how writers are intentional about the subjects they choose and how they choose to approach them. And it's interesting to hear you draw out how photographers have to make those same kinds of choices when they're in the moment, where to position themselves, what research they have to do beforehand. So that's very enlightening. So you mentioned in the article you were searching for the kind of perfect photo. Do you think that you got it? And what did you mean by the perfect photo? Was it something that would be striking, or were you trying to draw a connection to another series of images that you had in your mind and trying to create like a timeline?
How I feel, and one of the things that I have in my head over is my editors and past mentors, things that I have in my head is that, a perfect photo or a striking photo, a memorable photo is a photo that evokes some kind of feeling inside of you. When you first look at it, that that image is either going to bring you joy, it's going to bring you fear, it's going to bring you anger, or it's going to trigger a memory for you, and it's going to make you, it's going to make you say, "Damn." Um, I think a successful photo for me, in my opinion, is one that you're looking at it for more than 3 seconds. The average person looks at a photo for 2 to 3 seconds. If I can make you look at my photo for longer than that, then to me that's a perfect photo. And thinking back to it, while that photo of the horse and carriage with the hearse getting ready to cross over the bridge is a great photo. I think for me, the happenstance of where I was, I ended up taking one. In my opinion, I think it's a much better and striking photo. Um, when the hearse was coming, I turned around and the driver of the horse and carriage, he stopped and he stood up and he's put his hand on his chest. And at that moment, you had state troopers lined up saluting John Lewis's casket. And for me, while the reason why that moment was striking is because all the state troopers who were there saluting the casket and John Lewis were black.
Hmm.
And the importance of being at that site is John Lewis almost lost his life to state troopers back then,
Mhm.
and they were all white at that time. So it was just it shows how moments in history can change on the trajectory of the world and the world that we live in. And it was just I think to me, like I'm talking about it, it just gives me chills. And I look back and I think for me from that day, I think that photo for me encapsulates what I was aiming to do that day.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, I guess, awareness of that kind of sense of history. To kind of broaden outward, how do you approach projects where you document the Black experience in the United States or in other places?
Yeah.
Do you have a specific approach?
I mean, honestly, I just read and I do research. I look to see if anybody else has done any kind of photo projects on topics that I'm looking to do. But a lot of it is just reading. I read a lot. A few years back, I was doing a project on when I lived in Pittsburgh on poverty in Pittsburgh, and I started doing research and reading on poverty in America, and and how what policies were enacted and what could have changed the world. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago on a commission that Lyndon Johnson did on how to improve poverty in America and why poverty persists and the conditions for it. And once they saw what was causing poverty and so much anger and violence in America, they just kind of like nixed it. And I'm
Mhm.
blanking on that what that book was, but I read that book. I try and go read that book a lot because like had that commission been put out, there could have been a lot of different changes in America that would have made a lot of changes. I think back to Reconstruction. I think a lot of the problems
Yeah.
that persist in America right now is because Reconstruction was pretty much just kicked out of the way. Had Reconstruction had that come to pass and had none of that been backtracked, I think we would live in a totally different America.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. You mentioned that you were excited about this particular image that you produced because you felt that it was one that would make it into an actual history book. While Picturing Black History is not technically a history book, it does document historical moments, it does have historical narrative. How do you feel having kind of your piece and this image featured in the book?
It's exciting. I mean, there's been quite a few different books that have been made and published of Black history, and and I pretty sure I have them all. Some of them I have two copies of, and just going through it, and just going through those books, I've always like, like one day, I'm going to have my work in one of these books. It's almost kind of like I've spoken into existence, and just finally get an opportunity to have that, and have my photos with some of the greats that that have
Mhm.
been here before me, people who footsteps I follow. It was just an amazing honor. And I think one of the biggest differences between this book and the ones that came out previously is that they have words attached to them. There's a real big symbiotic relationship between images and words, and like words can be powerful just as images can be powerful, but put them together and it's just a totally it takes it to a whole different level.
What was your the reaction of your daughter when she actually has she seen the book? Has she gotten to like because I know
Yeah,
you mentioned
yeah, I've showed her the book, and my daughter just turned 3 years old, so she doesn't fully
okay,
understand. She doesn't fully understand.
one day.
Don't understand the significance of that. And every picture she sees, like, oh, that's that your photos, that your photos. So she understands that that the photos that I take, they end up somewhere, but she doesn't understand the significance of that yet. But I mean, she definitely will. But I did show her, and she's just like, okay, then I'm gonna go. Now I'm gonna go off and play. Do you want to go play with me over here?
Yeah.
But at some point, she'll come to understand and learn what this means.
Why do you think this specific project is important? You've kind of outlined the connection between pairing images and with words and the kind of
Hmm.
amplification that can have with someone's understanding of history. But can you talk about why the Picturing Black History book specifically is an important contribution to the kind of that project?
Yeah, I mean, you think about, like, the obvious answer is the pushback to Black history, African American history that's been happening in this country. That's you think about that's the obvious answer. I don't know. I get mixed feelings sometimes about saying Black history or African American history because to be honest, it's American history.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be separate from the history of America because African Americans and Black Americans have always been here. They've helped to make this country what it is. But at the same time, African American and Black history have been left out of the context of what's been taught. And like a lot of the things that I've learned, I didn't learn about them in school. They've helped me. They've helped to pique my interest to go out and learn more outside of school. But I didn't learn a lot of the stuff. A lot of these images that are in this book, a lot of people haven't seen. When I think about
Yeah.
civil rights images and images of resistance, they think about people automatically their minds go to protest images and
Mhm.
people um sitting in counters and getting food dumped on them. They think about the images of being bitten by dogs, but joy is a form of resistance.
Yeah.
And a lot of the images that are in this book from the pre-civil rights days are of joy, of young Black boys and girls having fun, smiling, enjoying the day. I think about the picture of Nina Simone holding the cup of champagne, smiling. Toni Morrison dancing. A lot of Black joy is a form of resistance, and to you think about, like, to live in the times where you were hated because of color of your skin. You have people just living and being themselves. You have pictures of steel workers, of cab drivers, of African American men and women in military uniforms. All of that is joy, and all of that is resistance, and those images are just as important as people fighting back
Yeah.
as well, because that's a form of
Definitely.
fighting back. You know.
Definitely is. I'm interested in something you talked about earlier. So, in your work as a photographer, working for a kind of news agency, how have you seen the coverage of kind of Black life and Black activity shift over
Hmm.
the course of, I guess, your time as a working photographer, as a
Hmm.
photojournalist?
I think it's a little bit different for me now because I don't work for a newspaper. I work for a wire agency. So
Mhm.
um,
Can
we
you
are
can you explain what the difference?
Yeah, so I mean, we think about like I used to work for a local newspaper. I used to work in Pittsburgh, and that Pittsburgh paper just pretty much focused on the community itself of what was happening in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
What's happened in certain communities, whether it be unfortunately violence or just celebrations that happen in the communities. So for myself right now with Getty Images, we're a wire service, so we provide coverage of relevant news events that are happening, not just this country, but also internationally. So a lot of our focus has to be on things that are of national interest,
Yeah.
per se. So, they are big events. I spent a lot of time last year and this year covering President-elect Trump's court cases, because that's of not just of local interest, but also national interest and international interest. So a lot of the stuff we do pretty much has to embody that kind of
I
sentiment.
see. Since Picturing Black History is a project that um, covers both Black life in America, but also throughout the entire world, can you go into a little bit more detail about how your work is international in nature now that you're
hmm
working for Getty Images?
I think back to like the March on Washington in 2020 that was put on by I believe it was 2020, it might have been 2021, by Reverend R. Sharpton and the National Action Network, where
Yeah.
they did the Million Man March again. That's one of those that it's, yes, we live in America, and it's important to Black folks here in America, but there's also Black folks who are living in other countries of the world who are gonna have their eyes on that. People travel from all over the country and all over the world to be here to march on that. That's one of those. That was one of those moments that was important to me for me to be there. Like, all right, like I wasn't around for the past Million Man marches that happened in this country, so I want to be there for this one, not just as a Black American, but also as a journalist, documenting what's happening here.
Yeah.
Um, Images from that day went around across the globe because a lot of people took when George Floyd was murdered. There was protests all across the world for that.
Yeah.
So I had some images that made it from that day that I believe that were used internationally as well. I'm thinking about one specific image where somebody held up a poster of George Floyd, and the poster was green, and he was like kind of like multicolored, and it was just in the middle of the frame, and it was just a pretty striking image. And I know that was pretty much used a lot in a lot of places, not just I believe not just here nationally, but also internationally as well.